In this lesson, we're going to be adding some variation and detail to our 3D design. This is where it gets fun. So I've saved my Cinema 4D file as design01, and I've saved that into my Domestika project, working, and Cinema 4D folder. So the first thing I'm going to do is give the ArtSmart object a bit more depth. I can do that by selecting on the object, heading to the Object tab. The extrude depth, I'm going to take that to 150. The next thing I'm going to do is go to Caps, and we're going to give the shapes a bit of edge detail. And then up the size of the bevel. You can see that that's actually definition around the edges of the shape. We can see some highlights. We don't actually need the detail on the back though, because we're only going to see one side. So what I'm going to do is take off the end bevel. We can keep the start bevel and make sure that the end bevel is set to 0. And that's because we don't want this extra information at the back, because it's going to slow the project file down. Now we can see we've got some edge detail there. The next thing I'm going to do is make the CV ArtSmart object editable. And this is because I want to take the control away from the plugin, be able to control and sort of add more features using the MoGraph functions in Cinema 4D. Before I make this editable, I need the color information from the plugin to create some materials. So we can do that by selecting on the object again, going to the object function and selecting Create Materials. So that's going to give us a material for each of the colors in the design, and these are Cinema 4D standard materials. So now I can select on the CV ArtSmart object, which is going to make that editable. And that's going to give me lots of nulls and extrude inside each of the nulls. Now we don't need all these nulls, so I'm going to clean this up a bit. First thing I'm going to do is take this null out of the CV ArtSmart object and delete that. I'm going to select this top path null and head to the bottom here, and pressing Shift, I'm going to select the bottom null. Then I'm going to right click, head down to Delete Without Children. And that's going to basically delete all of those nulls without deleting the extrudes inside them. That's going to give us all of our extrudes with the materials on them inside this design null here. We're going to use the MoGraph features inside Cinema 4D, so I'm going to head over to my MoGraph tab and select the fracture object, and then I'm going to drop this design null inside the fracture. And what that's going to do is give MoGraph the control of the design. With fracture selected, head to Object, and I'm going to change the mode from straight to explode segment. So now that's going to treat the object as individual elements rather than one. In order to put that to practice, with the fracture object selected, I'm going to go to MoGraph, Effector, Random Effector. You can see that that's moved all of the individual pieces by 50 centimeters on the X, Y, and Z. If I go to parameter here, I'm just going to zero out the X and the Y because we don't really need those. And we can just see what's happening with the Z axis here. And I can tell that we've got a few issues. You can actually see that we've got a couple of pieces here which are separate from the shapes that they're supposed to be a part of, and that's because their shapes weren't aligned to the grid properly. And we can sort that out. So the quickest way I find to sort this out is by selecting on the fracture object and then heading to the MoGraph tab. Then I'm going to go to MoGraph Selection. And what that's going to give me is the option to select individual clones, these little dots here. So now pressing Shift, I can actually select a number of the shapes. So basically anything that doesn't belong, I'm going to select. those three shapes there. We can always add them to the selection after the fact if we find them later, but I think that's it for now. That MoGraph selection's actually given me a little selection tag on the fracture object. With that selected and the fracture object selected, I'm going to go back to my MoGraph tab and then come down to hide selected, and that's going to hide those for me. It's going to create a plane effector here with the visibility tag ticked. And I don't actually think it's going to have that much of an effect on the design. Like if we come to our front view here, really subtle, the difference it's made. So we could fix that if we wanted, but the individual shapes are going to be quite layered. We probably won't notice it. So I'm going to leave it as is. With the random selector selected, I'm going to bring this down to just 40. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this null. I don't actually need the null. I want the information inside, but we don't actually need this null. So I'm going to clean this up just by selecting on this null, not the children. Right-clicking, and I'm going to delete without children. And that's just going to give me all of my extrudes, keeping all of the materials inside my fracture, which is all we need. I'm going to create a null. Call this effectors and just drop these two inside. I'm going to create another null just inside the shape tab here. Drop my fracture inside it as well. And just call it design. The next thing I'm going to do is I want this to feel like it's on the ground. So when we light it, it feels like it's an object being lit from above. So I'm actually going to change the rotation of it. Head to coordinates. I'm going to bring the P down to -90. So now we're currently looking at it from front on. You can look at it from above by just rotating the camera with these tools here. We've got pan, rotation, and zoom. So now we have control of our design in MoGraph using the fracture object.
Now that we have some variation in our 3D design, in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to animate using MoGraph. I look forward to seeing you there.